Welcome to the Stellar Vault. Say hi in the comments to awaken the archive. Then like, subscribe, and let the tale begin.
The first ship breached the stratosphere. 11 followed. Roy Sanderson finished his tea and hit the kill switch. Saltwater Colony didn't scream, didn't panic. From orbit, it probably looked like resignation. Rows of modular housing units, water mining pylons, algae beds glinting under the fractured blue sky. No military formations, no surface-to-air fire, no signal flare. Just static. The Vascari bloodcast interpreted that as weakness. Big mistake. The lead ship, a spined dreadform, with ridged armor and glyphs carved in ceremonial spirals, cut low over Sector 7. Dust peeled off the salt flats as it descended, engines throttling into precision landing. The others followed, taking up a wide encirclement pattern around the colony's core. Like they were surrounding prey. In the command hub, Roy watched from behind tinted glass. He didn't stand tall. He didn't give a speech. He just glanced at the wall. At the plain black panel marked only with a white glyph. He pressed it. It clicked once. And that was that. In the silence that followed, the colony shifted. Not loudly. Not with sirens. Just quiet movements. A greenhouse door closed. A water pump stuttered. Stopped. Then reinitialized. A child put down his toy drone and walked inside. Somewhere underground, a node hummed online. Silent. Networked. Unseen. Roy stepped outside as the first Vascari soldier crossed into colony bounds. Tall, triple-jointed legs, ridged jaw plates, obsidian skin glinting like armor. The warrior carried a hooked glaive across his back and a plasma pike in hand, not active, but held in that casual readiness the Vascari used to show they were honoring you with visible weapons. Behind him, 6 more filed in. Formation perfect, not a wasted step. The lead one, probably a voice cast or bloodline commander, stepped forward. He tapped a ceramic amplifier at his throat, voice layered with ritual cadence. You are within the sanctioned sphere of the Vascari bloodcast. You are surrounded. You are offered honorable terms of cession. You will receive water rights, biological quartering, and social positioning within the worker caste of Integration Tier 9. Resistance will nullify these terms. Roy blinked slowly. Logged, he said. The Vascari hesitated. Clarify, the voice cast said. Roy pointed to the sky. You'll want to log your losses. Below the salt beds, old war metal awoke. The drones weren't loud. They were Earth-made, built for zero signal infiltration and surgical elimination. They'd been buried in aquifers, in drain pipes, in ventilation systems tuned to trigger only when the phase line command cleared authorization. 3 launched simultaneously under Vascari drop zones. They didn't fly. They pushed. Air pressure spikes. Magnetolinear propulsion. No heat trails. One sliced clean through a bloodcast scout before his translator could squawk a warning. The second spiraled into a dropship exhaust vent, detonating a kinetic charge against its fuel baffles. The third never hit. It curved hard, then stopped in midair above the Vascari voice cast, projecting a red light across his chest like a hunter sizing up a beast. It pulsed twice, then it dropped, inert. Message delivered. Inside the colony, movement resumed. Serge Ivanov completed his inspection pass and keyed his headset. Officially, he was just a water systems technician. In reality, he was Sergeant Serge Ivanov, former 7th Recon Interference Unit. Package delivery confirmed. No leakbacks. We're clean, he said. Maintain scatter protocols, Roy replied. Switch to passive observation. We let them move next. Above them, the Vascari perimeter tightened. But now, formation frayed. Orders came slower. Tension was visible in their tail spines. Not fear. Not yet. Confusion. They were surrounded too. They just didn't realize it. Hours passed. The bloodcast moved in ritual steps, broadcasting surrender terms every 90 minutes. The last time they added a countdown. Saltwater ignored it. Roy walked the perimeter just after dusk. The sky above was dark, darker than any Vascari ship could register, shielded by atmospheric scramblers woven into the colony's weather grid. Stars barely pierced through. He paused by the old turbine housing near Grid 12. An old man sat there, sharpening a blade on a steel rod. "Didn't think we'd come back online," the man said. "We never went offline," Roy replied. The man chuckled. "Hell of a way to retire." Roy nodded. Behind them, a deep rumble echoed from the flats. Then screams. Dry, reptilian, brief. By morning, 5 Vascari patrol units were missing. 1 was returned, disassembled, reassembled, and posed outside their command post in a sitting position. A human gesture the Vascari found deeply disrespectful. The bloodcast called for parley. Roy accepted. They met at the edge of the salt basin, neutral ground. No weapons. Roy brought tea. He didn't offer any. The Vascari commander removed his helmet. "You kill without honor," he said. Roy sipped. "We kill to win." Silence. "You will bring ruin upon your kind," the commander said. Roy looked past him, at the distant flicker of orbital ships beginning to rise. Not descend. You already have. The Vascari ships ascended quietly into the upper stratosphere. From the comms tower, Roy Sanderson watched their hulls catch the light above Saltwater's cloud layer. They weren't retreating. They were repositioning. He stepped back from the glass, one hand still wrapped loosely around the cooling ceramic of his teacup. The Vascari had issued their parley, offered their ritual terms, and departed with no deal. That alone had disrupted the cadence of their invasion doctrine. Now they were about to improvise. "Ascension pattern holds," Ivanov's voice said in his ear, calm as ever. "Stacking for high-angle surface suppression. Looks like they're prepping for a dishonor purge." Roy walked to the command relay station and keyed a manual transmission into the colony's closed-band channel. "Initiate burn the formation." No alarms rang, but beneath Saltwater's cracked soil and modular hulls, the colony's real defenses stirred for the first time. Not everything here had been buried to hide. Some systems were dormant by design, waiting not for an invasion, but for confirmation that the invasion was dumb enough to play its hand. 2 kilometers beyond the primary habitat dome, Serge Ivanov crouched beside the open hatch of a launch platform concealed beneath the collapsed frame of a decommissioned water rig. The tubing above still dripped from last night's artificial rainfall cycle, a programmed illusion of environmental stability. Inside the shaft, 3 squat launchers hummed to life. "We're clear," Ivanov muttered, checking coil temperature with a brush of his fingers. "Vector set. Let it fly." There was no roar, no fire, only a low, bone-deep thud as the 3 projectiles punched into the sky in staggered sequence, slicing through cloud cover on magnetic rails. They weren't explosives. They were carriers, encased kinetic rods packed with pulse-scrambled data packets tuned to disrupt the Vascari's high-orbit sensor array. Roy had reviewed the schematics himself a dozen times since the project was greenlit. Not for accuracy. He trusted the tech. For effect. These weren't weapons meant to cripple a fleet. They were meant to make the bloodcast feel blind. Aboard the Vascari dreadform. Vareth Naal. The impact wasn't felt physically. The tremor came in silence, first as a flicker of navigation glyphs, then as a cascading drop in heat-mapping overlays and atmospheric pressure telemetry. The ship's internal lighting shifted automatically to the amber tone of battle readiness. Vascari don't shout. Their panic has no voice. Tacticians lowered their heads in deference to the command cast as they worked quickly across their control panels. They clicked, hissed, and exchanged rapid bursts of pheromone-coded signals. Commander Varnak, rigid at the center of the dais, didn't move. His back claws gripped the ritual spire beside his station. "They blind our eyes," one of the subcaste warriors offered, "yet strike not our hulls. It is misdirection." "It is bait," said another, older voice. "They are not prey. They are smoke." The commander didn't reply. Outside, something slammed against the outer viewport, an object tumbling fast from gravity's pull. It struck with a wet metallic thump and rolled, catching for a moment on the viewport's frame. It was a drone shell. Disassembled. Reassembled. Its outer casing had been marked with a human symbol the bloodcast didn't understand, but the message was clear. Mockery, intention, precision. Back on the surface, Roy descended into one of the old observation trenches that ringed saltwater's storage yards. The air tasted of polymer dust and alkaline runoff from the surrounding hydroponic fields, untouched since the last controlled burn. Marek Duval crouched beside a comms relay that had once controlled crop cycle data. The wiring had been replaced, rerouted through an uplink that didn't exist on any official spec sheet. His hands were black with carbon scoring. He looked like hell. "Patch stable?" Roy asked. Marek glanced up, squinting behind his cracked visor. "As long as no one sneezes near it." He snapped a housing shut with more force than necessary and tapped a small toggle switch built into his forearm unit. Above them, in the distance, 3 false heat signatures flickered into existence on Vascari scanners, full-spectrum thermal ghosts copied from saltwater's own environmental data. They lit up like civilian survivors trying to flee. Marek stood, exhaling sharply. "Should draw at least one scout formation," he muttered. "They'll think they're chasing down meat." Roy gave a nod, and instead, they walked straight into the phase line. The bloodcast didn't hesitate. 2 squads dropped from low orbit in fast skimmers, forming a perimeter sweep as their walkers advanced across the salt ridge near Sector 9. The terrain looked ideal for assault. Loose structures, poor cover, obvious signs of human activity. They advanced in a disciplined wedge formation, confidence carved into every footfall. Nothing on the surface hinted at danger. Not the fractured towers, not the silent energy readings, not even the tiny, child-sized drone that skittered from behind a wind vane and vanished into the rock. The collapse was sudden. Saltwater's ground grid had been laced with reactive support nodes months earlier, designed to look like geological flaws. When triggered, the entire basin gave way. The walkers dropped instantly, swallowed whole by the engineered sinkhole and the chemical sludge beneath it, slag from early terraforming, seeded with timed ignition cores. The detonation was low and muffled. There was no fireball, no dramatic flare, only dust and pressure. Of the 2 squads, only the bloodcast commander's skimmer stayed afloat. It rotated hard, searching for the source of the collapse. It didn't find it, but the drone did. A child's old toy, repurposed, rewired, weaponized. It drifted low, quiet as ash, then drove a sharpened tungsten needle through the rear coolant vent of the skimmer's housing, straight into the spinal core of the pilot. The craft dropped without sound. Ivanov watched from the northern ridge, optics pressed tight to his face. The air was still vibrating from the detonation below. He marked the perimeter collapse on his tablet, then keyed a private channel. Phase knife successful. 0 losses. They came armored. He paused, watching dust roll over the exposed trench walls like fog. "We brought the Earth." Far above, the bloodcast commander stood alone on the Varethnal's sanctum deck. Varnak hadn't moved in an hour. His advisors knelt. His tacticians waited. No one dared speak first. But someone did move. Kelraak, execution cast, stepped forward and placed one clawed hand on the base of the central command altar. His spines flared slightly, enough to signal aggression, not enough to issue formal challenge. "They defile our structure. They spit on ritual. And still we wait. Varnak did not answer. Kelrak turned and strode from the chamber. The ritual was broken. The command was divided. And Saltwater had not yet fired a single missile. Roy returned to the main ops bunker as the first survivors trickled in. A young man with shrapnel in his leg, a technician with burns across her shoulder, all light injuries, all expected. Corpsman Holland worked in silence, wrapping, injecting, moving from cot to cot without commentary. Roy approached, eyes scanning the corner of the ops display, where bloodcast units were now redeploying faster, sloppier, meaner. "They're adapting," Holland said quietly. Roy keyed in a new activation sequence. "No," he said. "They're reacting." He paused, then pressed the final switch. "And we are done reacting." Roy didn't wait to see if the lights turned red. If the system was active, the next part of the plan was already alive. "Begin ghost loop," he said. Far above the clouds, a derelict comm buoy, painted black, wrapped in old Terran armor glass, came online for the first time in 20 years. Its signal went out cold, narrowband, bouncing through atmospheric scatter like a whisper under a shout. The Vaskari fleet heard it first. Fractured snippets of Terran distress codes, comm-lagged sensor ghosts, conflicting audio bursts. Some messages screamed, others prayed. A few begged for help in broken Vaskari dialect. None of it was real. All of it sounded real enough to be dangerous. In the trench network near Sector 4, Serge Ivanov cracked his knuckles and slid the switch to full signal bleed. His helmet HUD blinked as 5 false uplinks registered across enemy channels, fabricated out of old hydropump echoes and surgically planted EM distortions. "They'll think we're scattered," Ivanov said, "and scared." Roy's voice came back, cold and even. "They need to believe we've already lost. That's when they lose themselves." He paused. "Send Krychek." Santo Krychek had already moved. No helmet, just a half-wrapped pressure hood and a cracked visor. His team, 4 black cell operators, all ghosted in official records, moved through the buried transport tunnels beneath the colony's east ridge, cutting power lines and sensor repeaters as they went. They were headed for a bloodcast supply cradle, mobile command, mid-level logistics cache, and an uplink relay node. Krychek's boots hit dirt as he emerged into a ravine carved by abandoned mining drills. The target sat 100 meters ahead, 4 Vaskari, maybe 5, guarding the prefab shell like they were posted on ceremonial duty. He didn't wait. A sharp hand signal. 2 shadows broke left, 1 high. Krychek and his second slid through the dust like ghosts. The first Vaskari went down with a blade punched through the underjaw. Silent, clean, hard enough to crack the spine. The second turned, raised its weapon. Krychek fired a rail spike into its visor at 10 feet. The shot didn't burn. It caved the skull in. The third tried to retreat. A cryopick caught it in the ribs. Armor split. The hiss of leaking coolant was the last sound it made. The last Vaskari activated a distress glyph on its gauntlet. It was still glowing when Krychek stepped forward and jammed a magnetic charge to the base of the creature's throat. Flash. Smoke. Bone. They planted the forged message capsule inside the relay node, a Vaskari internal communication, fabricated by Saltwater's linguistic AI and warped through broken syntax. It suggested treason, leaked coordinates, a corrupted command string originating from the Bloodcast's own upper caste. By the time anyone would decode it, they'd be too angry to verify it. Krychek glanced at the remains of the guards. "Stack 'em." The team arranged the bodies in a Bloodcast ritual pose, wrong on purpose, weapons reversed, joints misaligned, spines snapped at the wrong angles. They left it that way. Inside the Vareth Nal, Commander Varnak watched the signal playback on an encrypted channel. The language was crude, fragmented, but it was Vaskari. and it bore a senior caste signature key. Kelrak hissed. Forgery. Where did they get the code? HFY asked, voice quieter than the rest. No one answered. I will challenge, the dual caste continued. If they have gained knowledge of us, I will take it from their flesh. Varnak said nothing. Kelrak's tail lashed once across the deck. Or we burn them from orbit. End this farce. Your fire won't reach the ground if your ships shoot each other first, came the reply from the tactician caste, one of the few still kneeling. They've already made us blind. The command chamber fell silent. Outside, 2 Veskari vessels drifted apart in conflicting orbital vectors, each reacting to different threat signatures. Misinformation had become momentum. In the saltwater command bunker, Roy watched a grainy playback, flickering data recovered from a backup drive sealed during the fall of Sol. It showed a corridor, Earthside, government evac protocol in full collapse, soldiers in Terran black trying to hold a line that didn't exist anymore, a father holding his daughter. The girl was crying. The father wasn't. Roy watched the father hand her off to a medic, then turn and walk into the fire line with nothing but a sidearm. No words, just duty. He closed the file. The past had taught him how not to lose again. Merrick Duval was wiring a signal node into an old drill rig when he heard it, the slight hiss of displaced air behind him. Not wind. He spun, barely got an arm up as the Veskari scout lunged from behind a shattered support beam. The creature was wounded, limping, scorched, but fast. Duval fell backward, grappled for the toolkit at his belt. The Veskari raised its glaive. Duval jammed a flathead screwdriver into the thing's throat and kicked out its knee. It staggered. He got on top of it before it could howl. Steel met cartilage, then bone. The creature twitched once, then stopped. Duval stood slowly, panting, his shirt wet with blood that wasn't his. He looked down at the mess, then kicked the body once out of habit. Not today, lizard. Back in orbit, the bloodcast command deck was fraying. Commanders rotated in tighter circles, growling half-words between them. The signals they were intercepting told a dozen conflicting stories. Some humans had surrendered. Others had declared secession from Earth. A few claimed to be defectors to the bloodcast cause. One fragment even referenced an ancient Veskari caste that hadn't existed in over 3 centuries. Every signal was a lie, but no one could agree which ones. Varnak stood at the center of it all, head bowed. His silence was no longer power. It was weight. Then a new signal came through. Clean, pure, precise. A bloodcast dual glyph. Authenticated. Caste marked. Location tagged to the salt basin on the surface. We challenge. But none of the command caste had sent it. Kelrak hissed in rage. HFY smiled with all of his teeth. Roy stood atop the outer rim of Saltwater's main generator tower, wind curling around his coat. Ivanov approached from behind, helmet tucked under one arm. We stirred the nest, Ivanov said. Roy didn't answer. He was watching the clouds, where the orbital shadows began to break formation again. They're moving blind, Ivanov continued. 3 ships running separate threat patterns. No coordinated strike. Half their ground teams are off formation. They'll split further before they collapse, Roy said. Ivanov smirked. You want them to tear themselves apart. No, Roy said. I want them to remember who made them bleed. A soft chime echoed from the portable console at his hip. Incoming message. Roy opened it. The dual glyph glowed blue, authenticated, echoing through the bloodcast network. It was looping on their channel, and Saltwater's. The translator parsed it into Terran Standard. You wanted war. This is memory war. Welcome to it. Roy closed the console. That'll do. The duel was never about honor. It was about misdirection, which meant Roy had already won before it started. Saltwater's acceptance of the Bloodcast challenge arrived in their comms net, cloaked in corrupted syntax. It mimicked ritual cadence, followed cast formal tone structures, but each phrase had just enough drift to irritate trained Vascari linguists. They couldn't dismiss it outright. They also couldn't ignore its implication. The humans knew their codes. Location: Basin 12. A wide-open salt crater where no heat signatures had pinged in days. Supposedly neutral ground. Supposedly. Roy had walked the perimeter with Ivanov 3 hours earlier. Beneath the shallow crust of the basin, the colonists had buried a custom signal scrambler. On top of that sat a surface relay node, modified to broadcast a Vascari glyph that didn't exist in current cast protocol. A ghost message. If they were going to fight a duel, they would do it inside a lie. HFY arrived in full regalia. Gleaming blade axes hung from his back like folded wings, and ceremonial armor curled tight around his second spine. His arrival was ritual perfect, his posture lethal. The Predator cast formed a silent circle behind him, 6 in total, eyes glowing beneath tinted helmets. Across the field stood Krychek. No armor, no insignia, just a scorched coat, a dull vibroblade, and a cracked visor slung around his neck. He hadn't shaved, hadn't even cleaned the blood off his boots. HFY studied him. The warrior's mandibles twitched once, a signal of confusion, maybe contempt. The Vascari would expect formality. Bowing. Recitation. Krychek stepped forward and spat in the dust. Let's get on with it. The first exchange was clean. HFY advanced fast, striking low, feinting left, then snapping a follow-through that would have taken Krychek's leg off. But Krychek wasn't there. He moved like smoke, not with grace, but with calculated ugliness. The second time they clashed, Krychek caught one of HFY's blade axes with his forearm, letting the edge tear through his coat and flesh. He used the pain to step in and drive his blade straight into the alien's side, just below the ceremonial plate. The blade didn't go deep, but it went true. HFY recoiled, not from the injury, but the shock of being touched. The duel was no longer ritual. Now it was something else. Half a kilometer away, Holland was wedged inside the base of a hollowed-out relay tower, sweat slicking down his back as he cross-wired the basin's atmosphere scrambler. His hands moved fast over the manual leads. No drone support. No AI assist. We're 10 seconds out from full distortion, he said. Ivanov's voice crackled over the private band. Duval's prepping the second pulse. Hold your mark. Holland snapped the final leads into place and hissed out a breath. Mark ready. Beneath the basin, the device pulsed to life. It didn't broadcast noise. It broadcast disagreement. Sensor glitches, atmospheric ghosts, mismatched heat trails. The Vascari above didn't notice it yet. That would come later. In orbit, the Vareth Null began to drift. Its helix link with groundside command jittered as the pulse bled upward through reflected bounce signals. The fleet's secondary dreadform pinged a false movement signature rising from Saltwater's eastern ridge, an entire human convoy that didn't exist. They readied weapons, held fire, waited for confirmation. It never came. Back in the basin, Krychek bled from 3 places, but never looked winded. He kept moving, not with speed, but with decision. Every time HFY struck, Krychek let him land a blow. Let the Vascari feel in control. Then took something from him. A step, a stance, a breath. HFY was beginning to tremble. Not from pain, but from confusion. Krychek moved in again, fast this time, jamming the vibroblade under the left armpit. It skidded off armor. HFY caught him by the throat and lifted him clean off the ground. They locked eyes. Krychek smiled. Duval's EMP rig was primed behind a rock formation half a click away. He knelt beside the blast cone, hand on the trigger node. His comms link was open, the signal tight. Ready on burst. Ivanov gave the go. Duval triggered the device. A silent ripple flared upward, No boom, no flash. Just a localized kill wave aimed at the orbital uplink. In orbit, 3 Vascari ships flared with alert signals. Comms fractured. Chain of command signals bounced back, unreadable. The Varethnal spun 5 degrees off vector. For 17 seconds, the bloodcast lost complete orbital sync. Krychek hit the ground hard as HFY released him. Dust filled his mouth. His blade was gone. But the bloodcast warrior hesitated. HFY looked around. Something had changed. He heard voices. Bloodcast command lines, distorted, disconnected, static. Krychek rose slowly. You don't know who's watching now, do you? HFY snarled. Krychek let him, then turned and walked away. Not retreat. Not victory. Just contempt. 2 of the Vascari moved to intercept. HFY raised a hand, stopped them. He looked down at his side, touched the drying blood. The Predator cast carried him out. No one spoke. Behind them, the Duel circle broke. Roy stood at the edge of Saltwater's internal ops chamber, watching the flickering holomap of the upper orbit. They'll hold fire for now, Ivanov said. They're off rhythm. No Doctrine for a half-duel and a broken uplink. Roy nodded. His eyes tracked 3 separate bloodcast strike units in low orbit, none of them responding to command pings. Half their ground teams were frozen. The rest were receiving false orders, fed by Saltwater's ghost loop. HFY's not dead, Ivanov added. Roy turned to the vault access terminal. No, he said. He became something worse. He keyed in the final passcode. The wall split open, and the chamber inside hissed with pressure change. Cold air poured out. Inside in stasis, an AI core older than the colony. A sealed cryo case marked Omega Directive. A Terran beacon with the Earth seal burned half off. Holland stepped in behind him. What is that? He asked. Roy stared at it for a long moment. Insurance. In orbit, Kelrak stood in the command pit of the bloodcast warship Nasiva, flanked by warriors loyal to no doctrine but strength. He watched the Duel footage on repeat, mandibles flexing. He'd seen enough. No more ritual, he said. He turned to his crew. No more waiting. His hand dropped to the ignition glyph of the orbital siege cannon. The cannon fired. It didn't matter. From the sky, the energy beam split the clouds in a perfect column of light. Roy stood at the edge of the command platform and watched it fall. Bright, clinical, absolute. It struck Saltwater's eastern perimeter, right where the bloodcast thought it would hurt most. Sector 12 vanished in a blast of white heat and vaporized salt. The ground cracked. Half a kilometer of hydrogrid infrastructure crumpled like foil. Wind followed the collapse, screaming across the trench lines. Inside the ops center, the floor shook. Consoles blinked. Alerts flared across the local net. But no one shouted. No one ran. Roy keyed a channel to Ivanov. Report! Crackling static then. I'm alive. Duval's hit. Bad. Roy's hand paused above the console. Location? Beneath the intake conduit. Sector 12's edge. I'm pulling him out. Roy didn't ask if he could. He simply said, Phase field goes live in 90 seconds. Be clear. Then he turned to the AI core. It pulsed faintly inside its housing. Dark steel wrapped in old Terran script, some of it half erased by age. The Omega Directive case sat open beneath it, frost still curling from its sides. Roy placed his hand on the interface. Collapse protocol. Confirm activation. The AI's voice was quiet, neutral, ageless. Confirmed. Outside, nothing changed, and then everything did. In orbit, the bloodcast fleet tracked the blast with ritual precision. The Nasiva drifted just behind the orbital line, its command pit lit in orange pulse as data relays came in. Kelrak watched the scans, saw the eastern sector's heat map drop to 0. He turned to his execution cast. We begin descent. No hesitation, no request for confirmation. He had stopped asking. At the blast site, Ivanov dragged Duval through the twisted wreckage of collapsed support beams and slagged trench mesh. Duval's left side was burned black, and blood seeped from 3 different points. His eyes were half-lidded, but still locked on Ivanov's. "Just leave me," he rasped. "Shut up," Ivanov said, not slowing. "You're not dying in a hole. You're dragging a dead man. Sector's gone." "Sector's covered." Ivanov pulled him into the shell of a destroyed command node and kicked the manual override on the floor hatch. It opened. He dropped them both inside. 2 seconds later, the phase mask activated. To orbit, to thermal imaging, to Vascari ground sensors. Sector 12 was gone. No survivors, no signal. Just death. Roy had given the bloodcast what they wanted to see. On the western ridge, Holland knelt beside a transport relay. Krychek was already inside the Vascari drop zone, laying signal flares to falsify descent data. The bloodcast would think they were landing on clean ground. They weren't. Krychek's voice cut through the channel. "Charges planted. Uplink infected. You'll have to move fast." "I'm not the one walking into hell," Holland replied. Then pressed the detonator. The drop beacon flared, blinked twice, red, then green. Above them, 4 bloodcast landers altered course mid-descent, angling toward the falsified beacon. None of them would make it. Back in orbit, the Nasva rocked as another bloodcast warship veered off its path, targeting the cratered colony with pre-authorized fire coordinates. Kelrak roared, "Hold your vector!" The other ship didn't respond. Its command channel was locked, jammed by conflicting orders sent from what appeared to be another bloodcast ship. The source was forged. Roy's team had made it just convincing enough. Kelrak turned to his crew. "They're compromised." A pause. "Fire on them." The Nasva's forward batteries lit up, and in a single burst, the bloodcast fleet turned on itself. Doctrinal collapse. Inside saltwater, Roy stood before the AI core as the final signal synced. The Omega Directive had never been a weapon. It was a recorder. The AI had cataloged every engagement, every bloodcast command failure, every psychological fracture. It had already begun broadcasting the metadata into deep space, layered in quantum pulse, encrypted with Terran cultural syntax. A message not to humanity. A message about humanity. "Why are they tearing themselves apart?" Holland asked from behind him. Roy didn't look back. "Because they've already lost the definition of winning." He pointed to the display. A live feed from the bloodcast's internal net. Screaming. Cast logs deleted. Orders contradicted. "They fight by rule," Roy said. "We fight by memory." In the ruins of Sector 12, Duval lay propped against the collapsed structure, hand on a dead man switch wired to a directional plasma charge. Ivanov had left him there, reluctantly, after Duval shoved him out of the blast zone. "They'll come to see what's left," Duval had said. "Let them." His fingers were burned raw. He couldn't feel the button anymore. Didn't matter. He was ready. When the first bloodcast unit broke through the edge of the rubble, Duval smiled. The charge ignited. Sector 12 lit up a second time. No survivors. Above the chaos, 3 bloodcast warships broke formation and ran. 2 were intercepted by their own. The third made it to the edge of the orbit and disappeared into slip space. None of them ever re-established command. Roy stood on the outer deck as the light from Sector 12's second burn reached the western sky. He didn't blink. Ivanov stepped up beside him, arm in a sling, face half-bandaged. "It worked," he said. "We made them eat their own." "They did that," Roy said. "We just held up a mirror." He turned and walked inside. The AI's voice echoed softly as he passed. "Collapse protocol complete. Cultural imprint logged. Memory sync finalized." Roy paused. "There's one last thing," he said. He uploaded a local recording. Saltwater's internal logs, the faces of the dead, the last stand in Sector 12. The final frame showed Marek Duval sitting with the detonator watching the dust roll in. Roy tagged it. Humanity. Saltwater node. He added no message. The image said enough.